I just would love to really quickly introduce you to Kerry, who did the course of.
Morning.
How you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. You?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
So, you came on Alpha last term.
I did.
And 6 months ago, would you have called yourself a Christian? Were you a churchgoer?
No, not at all. So I grew up with Christian values. My nan was incredibly religious. She used to drag me to church every Sunday and then go to Sunday school. And I was the person in the back of the church that was always bored, having to have little games to keep me entertained. It was really old-fashioned, proper kind of Bible bashing, just sitting there. There was no song, there was no worship. My belief really was tarnished in my late teens and early 20s. I became quite awkward around the G word, and probably still am a little bit today, in all honesty. But despite that, whilst I wouldn't have called myself a Christian, I've always been brought up with Christian values.
Yeah.
So my beliefs in being, kind of good Samaritan. I've always been a bit of a do-gooder. So where there's something for me to get involved in, I always have. So whether I would have called myself a Christian before or even now is kind of questionable, really.
Yeah.
I certainly would have followed those values.
And how did you end up on Alpha? And how was it?
All right. Well, Alpha really was kind of a follow-up from a journey of my bestest friend in the whole wide world, Nikki, who had done Alpha a year previously, and really got kind of sucked into the whole Christian world. And I saw so many changes in Nikki. I was going through a really difficult relationship breakup. I was in a really bad place. Nikki was trying to convince me to go on to Alpha, but I knew it was something I needed to do myself. And so probably 6 months went by, and then I randomly just joined an Alpha course without anybody knowing. Alpha has been amazing for me, probably because of, two very special leaders, Dan and Beth Lane. They were amazing. They just accepted me for who I was, for my warts and all, for my kind of quirky, sweary kind of ways. And actually, I found, friends for life during that course, people that normally I wouldn't have met. I found inner peace, a bit of inner calm, worship, the singing has become part of my daily routine again. And everybody was so patient with me, because of all the people on that Alpha course, I'd probably say I was the one that, even though I'd had experience through Sunday school and my nan, I knew the Bible the least. So when videos were being shown, I was always the one to say, I have no idea what that was all about. But actually, it just was the most incredible bond with the most incredible people. The Alpha weekend was really kind of the peak for me. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go, but being mixed with all of those people that just made me feel so loved and so welcomed, it really was the best thing that I've ever done.
Fab. Kerry, thank you so much.
That's all right.
See you again soon.
Bye.
So that was Kerry. And if you've got questions about life, faith, what's going on, maybe just got a bit more time on your hands at the moment, or you've got friends who you'd love to come on this journey, people like Kerry in your life, then we'd love to have them. Please go to pattonchurch.org/Alpha to sign up for Alpha, which starts this Wednesday, 29th of April. Brilliant. So we're going to open our Bibles together, and we've been in a series for the last few weeks called Because Jesus. We're looking at this person of Jesus who we are completely captivated by, and seeing how his life might impact our lives. So we're going to be in a moment. If you've got a Bible or on your phone, you can search for John chapter 13. That's where we're going to be in just a moment. Now, I've had a few different jobs. I've worked in quite a few churches as well as a few other random places. And one church I went to, we sort of moved our family to be at this church, and it was exciting. And early on, someone who was organising the food for the Sunday. So if you've ever been to Patton Church, you'll know we have like croissants and that sort of thing, and snacks for people as we arrive. Well, we had that, but it was over a few different sites. So I was helping my friend who was sorting the food into the various bits for the various services at different sites, different times. And I remember saying to her, oh, isn't this an amazing job you do? And actually, because you sort the food so well, people are welcomed brilliantly, because you get everything in the right place. When someone comes to church for the first time, they get a great welcome. She was like, oh yeah, I've never quite thought of it that way. Well, a few weeks later, I was told that actually she's not going to be doing it anymore. That's actually going to be just me sorting the food on my own for all this stuff. And suddenly, that sense of what a wonderful job that was seemed to dissipate in a moment. I was there and I was muttering away to myself, can't believe I have to sort this food, all this food, I've like moved my family here and just the least gracious, the least servant-hearted. And that's something that a place I can get into sometimes, and maybe some of you can relate. You're probably all much more wonderful than me, but we have those moments where we're like, do I have to do that? And maybe right now in lockdown, as the pressures of life are quite different, you can have moments where you just feel like, oh, do I have to do that? I used to be important. Now I'm having to try and teach phonics to a 4-year-old. That's actually a very important job. But in the moment, we can be a bit like that. And the story we're looking at today from John chapter 13 is about this thing of serving. We're thinking about because Jesus serves. So if you've got a Bible or you'll come up on the screen, we're in John chapter 13. I'll read for you from verse 1. It says, "It was now the day before Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. He'd always loved those in the world who were his own, and he loved them to the very end. Jesus and his disciples were at supper. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, the thought of betraying Jesus. Jesus knew the Father had given him complete power. He knew that he'd come from God and he was going to God. So he rose from the table, took off his outer garment and tied it round his waist. Then he poured some water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with a towel around his waist." Jump to verse 12. "After Jesus had washed their feet, he put on his outer garment and returned to his place at the table. "Do you understand what I've just done to you?" he asked. "You call me teacher and Lord, and it's right that you do so, because that is what I am. I, your Lord and teacher, have just washed your feet. Then you should wash one another's feet. I have set an example for you, so that you will do just what I have done. I'm telling you the truth. Slaves are never greater than their master, and messengers are never greater than the one who sent them. Now that you know this truth, how happy you will be if you put it into practice." And so, God, I pray for every one of us listening, wherever we are, that you speak to us in this moment by your Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. So this was right close towards the end of Jesus' ministry, just days before he was going to die on a cross. And he was with his friends, his disciples, those who were close to him, the ones that he loved, that he poured into, those the ones that he'd built up and journeyed with. He was with those guys, and they come in and they sit down, and no one washes their feet. Now, they didn't have like shoes like we have that were like really good at covering up the all the mud and stuff, and they didn't have nice tarmac roads. They'd be muddy and dusty feet. Now, I've got in my hallway here, we actually have like white tiles. Some of you have been to my house, and if people don't take their shoes off, we know about it immediately because our white tiles show everything. Now, these guys have been walking around dusty roads, dusty feet. They didn't have the same access to showers and things like we do, and so their feet were gross. And normally, when you come into someone's house, there'll be a servant who would wash their feet, but that didn't happen. There was no one to wash their feet. Now, the next most appropriate thing probably would have been for one of the disciples to wash Jesus' feet and to wash each other's feet. But the trouble with the disciples, They were good guys, but they were always sort of jockeying for position. Who's the most important? Which one does Jesus love the most? Who's the most significant? So they weren't going to wash each other's feet. That wasn't going to happen. No, none of them were going to say, I was on the bottom of the pile. Now, if I was Jesus, given that he knew he was about to die on the cross for these ungrateful people, if I was Jesus, I would have asked one of them. Actually, I would have told Judas. So if you know the story, Judas, one of Jesus' disciples, actually betrays him to the authorities, and he's the one who gives him away. So having been Jesus' follower for 3 years, he then gives him away to the authorities. Now, if I was Jesus, I would have got Judas to wash my feet. I would have said, hey, Judas, my feet are a little bit dirty. Can you wash them? That's what I would have done. But I'm not Jesus, far from it. And then what Jesus does, we read it in verse 4 and 5. It says, so he rose from the table, took off his outer garment, tied a towel around his waist, got dressed up like a servant. Then he poured some water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and dry them with a towel around his waist. That's what Jesus did. Now, partly, this is a picture, it's an allegory about Jesus' life and the greatest act of service in the history of the world, where Jesus, just like it says in the verse that he got up from the table, or Jesus came down from heaven. It says that he took off his cloak, or Jesus took off his godness. It says that he put on a towel, or Jesus put on humanity and humility. And then it says that he poured out the water into the basin, or Jesus poured out his very blood for you and me on the cross, so that we can be clean spiritually, so we can be made holy. So when God looks at us, he doesn't see all the rubbish I do, all the terrible thoughts I have, all the way I hurt people, all the rubbish I've done in the past and will do in the future. He sees us as clean because of what Jesus has done. It's a picture of that. And if you don't know that you've been forgiven, you can know that. That's one of the gifts, the greatest gift we get as Christians. So part of this is a picture of that, a picture of the greatest moment in history. But also the actual act in the moment is mind-blowing. Jesus washes his disciples' feet. Jesus, at the start of John, we looked at it in our first week of this Because Jesus series, we're told that Jesus was with God in creation. So you've got God there from the start, steps down and then serves. He serves. And service is actually the antidote to comparison and to competition. And it can be so easy for us to have comparison and competition just creep up in ordinary life. And even now, even in lockdown, you can look at everyone else and think they're doing better than me. You know, you can look at how people are homeschooling their kids, but they're doing better than me. You can look at the person who's learned 3 languages in the last 5 weeks. They're doing better than me. You can look at people who've got, and you can, even in this moment, you can think everyone else is doing better, or the opposite, that we can justify where I am based on other people. And actually serving is the antidote to that. You see, because comparison and climbing this ladder, trying to get more successful and in a better place, what happens is we climb that ladder and then we realize that that ladder is against the wrong wall. That comparison and competition actually get us nowhere. And the antidote, the invitation, the thing we were made for, the place that leads to life, is when we serve. And we're told that Jesus got up. It was something intentional. It didn't happen by accident. He got up and he served. And we're invited to do the same. And he says in verse 17, he says, now that you know this, how happy, other translations say blessed, you will be if you put it into practice. And you could probably even think right now about someone you know who's serving, and actually they're so happy. I think about a guy, Ken, I used to know. He was actually the caretaker of the church I was at growing up. But When he wasn't getting paid to serve, he was doing it for free. He'd be around people's houses, helping out. He fixed stuff at our house. When I had to tow my car somewhere, it was Ken who came out to help. He was always serving. And actually, he was so joyful. That was something that we saw in Ken, a joyfulness. And you can think about people who serve in big ways. There's a guy actually, he's on the Alpha videos. If you do Alpha, you'll see a guy called Scott Harrison. And he thought, actually, what I want to do is I want to get all the stuff people get. I want to get money. I want to get stages. I want to get success. I want to get a good-looking girlfriend. And he had all these things. He drove a BMW. He had a nice apartment. His girlfriend was a model. He had all of these things, but actually he wasn't happy. And he took a break in 2004 and spent a couple of years on the Mercy ships, which are these boats that travel around the world and helping people. And something shifted in him, and he started to serve. He started an amazing Charity Water, who are trying to get water to people around the world. And he will tell you in a moment how much happier he is, that he's using his gifts to serve, that he's using his gifts to make a difference. And often for me, I can think about my leadership, or my calling, or my purpose. We can think about my career. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But how often do I flip it around and ask the question and say, who am I helping? Who is my life helping? Who's better off because of what I'm doing? Whose life is a bit more like heaven because of what Joel does? Where am I actually making a difference? How am I flipping this thing round? What's changing? I had a friend, still a friend, great friend, and she worked for an organisation, and she used to run a project with someone else. And running the project together, there was just this bit of comparison and competition that crept in. Maybe you work with other colleagues, and that just creeps in sometimes. And when my friend was leaving, and not because of that incident, because she was moving on to something else, she was talking a bit about this comparison and this competition. And I said to her, what would happen if these last 2 months you flipped the emphasis and you thought, how can I set up my colleague to succeed when I leave? How could I have it that in 2 months' time when I go, she is set up to thrive, to run this brilliantly without me, that my job is to see her fly? And so for the last 2 months, that's what she did. And guess what? That transformed her experience of work for those final 2 months. Everything changed because she was serving. And Jesus is right. Actually, when we start living for other people, not just for ourselves, when we start living to make other people's lives more like they will in heaven, something shifts. How might God be inviting you to serve? How might he invite you just to get low a little bit, just to get down a little bit, to say, okay, I'm not gonna climb. I'm gonna wash some feet. I'm gonna serve. I'm gonna put the towel on. And I know lots of you are doing that right now. And I love on Thursdays when we're cheering on our key workers and NHS and healthcare workers who are getting low, and amazing people are doing great stuff with the places where they are. And you're probably doing this already. But then maybe God's inviting you just to get low a little bit. And in that, it's actually going to be better, not worse. It's going to be happier, not less happy. It's going to be more fulfilled, not less fulfilled. I've got a friend who lives there. She's just around the corner here where I am. And he runs this running club. And when I go running, I'm like a selfish runner. I'm trying to get quicker. I'm trying to hit my targets. That's sort of how I think. He thinks the opposite. He gets people together and he helps people achieve better than they could. And he could run much quicker than he does with people, but he just cheers them on. And when he runs a marathon, his success in this race is based on how other people do. And he's actually happier. Who are you calling to serve? What might this look like for you? In lockdown and beyond, where is God inviting you to serve? Why don't you give it a go this week? So this week, I'm going to say yes to God in serving. And maybe you're not even a Christian watching this. What might that look like if you give that a go? we say, actually, I'm going to try and serve a bit more. Because Jesus serves, we serve gladly. But that's true. But there's just one important verse I want to remind you of about this when it comes to serving, is that it says in verse 3, you might want to read back along with me, John 13 verse 3, it says, this cat's coughing away, sneezing away, she's not sick, just John 13 verse 3, it says, Jesus knew that the Father had given him complete power. He knew that he'd come from God and was going to God. So he rose from the table, took off his garment. It's like in that moment before serving, Jesus was reminded who he was. He was reminded that he had authority. He was reminded that he had all power, that he was from heaven, that he was going to heaven. He was reminded of that in that moment. He wasn't thinking, it's my last chance with disciples. How am I going to get them to like me? He wasn't thinking, oh, no one's washing feet, so I'll do it. He was reminded of who he was, that he was loved by God, that he had authority and power, that he was from heaven, that he was going to heaven. And then because he knew who he was, he chose to serve. And our serving is invited to be serving from identity, serving from knowing who we are, serving from a place of love. Because we can know those things the same as Jesus did. We can know that we have authority. Ephesians writes and says that because Jesus died, we've been raised up and seated with him. We know who we are. And just like Jesus, we can know that we've got a home in heaven, that's actually our true home, that life is but a drop in the ocean compared to eternity, that we have got a home with God, that we have status, that we are loved, that we are sons and daughters of God. We can know this. This is an invitation that we can know this stuff. We can know our destination with confidence that we've got eternity with God. We can step into that identity, and then we can serve from identity, not for it. We can serve from affirmation, not for affirmation. We can serve from love, knowing that God loves us, rather than trying to get love from other people. And this is so key to how we serve, that we live from identity. Almost 1 year ago, actually last week, was a fire in Notre Dame, where the cathedral was burned. And there was this image that Tom's going to put up for us, this image that was powerful. And when everything else was burning, all the wooden structure, what was left was this cross. And that's because gold melts at a high temperature. But it's such a great metaphor that you and I, when everything's shaking around us, and it can feel a bit like that right now, for lots of us, it's a disorientating, scary, worrying time. Everything's shaking. But we can know our identity because of what Jesus did. We can know who we are. We can know that we're loved. We can know that we've got a place in heaven. We can know that our eternity is secure. You can know that today. And then we can serve from that place. While everything else is shaking, our identity isn't. Thanks so much. And that's the invitation. Things are shaking around us, but you can know that you are loved, that you are accepted, that you are walking in authority, that you are made exquisitely. You are made exquisitely. You have purpose and gifts. Your eternity is secure. God is with you. And that's what Jesus was doing. He was reminding in that moment, I've got all power. I'm from God. I'm going to God. So knowing that, I'm going to serve. There was no comparison. There was no competition. It wasn't meeting some sort of need in Jesus. He was serving. And that's the invitation, that we serve gladly from identity. That we let go of the striving. We take off that heavy cloak A few months ago, Tom preached a great word, and he wore a backpack, a big heavy backpack for most of it, and then he took it off. And that's what we can do today. Just take it off. That striving, that competition, that needing to be someone. No, identity is secure. And it's so important that John left that verse in, that Jesus knew who he was, and then he got low, and then he served, and then he took off his sort of greatness and said, how can I make a difference to you? How can I serve those around me? How can I make their lives more like heaven? How can I make Swindon more like heaven? How can I make a difference where I am? Because Jesus serves, we serve gladly from identity. Where have I been finding my identity in other places? Where have I been looking for the affirmation of others or status? You've got it already. This is the invitation. Who needs to be reminded today that identity is sorted by Jesus? Through faith in him, it all shifts. What might it look like for you to live from that identity this week? And then from that place, who am I called to serve? Who are you called to serve? Maybe it is the kids you're homeschooling who aren't always so grateful for the sacrifices you're making. Maybe it's that neighbour you're helping out who's sometimes actually a bit difficult. Maybe it's that friend where it's a one-way relationship most of the time. But you're called to serve. Because Jesus serves, we serve gladly from identity. At Pattern Church, we've got a vision, inviting people into family to serve Swindon. We've got big dreams. We're dreaming of 1,000 baptisms. We're dreaming of an army of young people full of life and joy and peace running after Jesus. We're dreaming of being a church who plants churches who plant churches. We're dreaming about making a difference to some of the social issues in our town here in Swindon. We're dreaming of playing our part in seeing Swindon come alive. But that only happens as each one of us gladly serve from identity. Imagine if this week we let go of the comparison, we let go of the competition, we didn't judge how we were doing based on how everyone else was doing, but we knew who we were in God. Imagine if we got our affirmation from God rather than the other stuff. And then with confidence and joy, we served. We got down, we got low. We didn't just serve ourselves, but we served other people. We looked for places to make other people's lives more like heaven. And imagine the new sense of joy we carry, the new sense of purpose, the new sense of partnership with God in all we're doing. Because Jesus served, we serve gladly.